Someone who has been through too much finally sits down on a bed, on a bus seat, on the floor of a bathroom. Doesn't matter where. What matters is the feeling. They sit there not because they're tired, but because something inside them quietly collapses. Upon like a bridge holding up more weight than it was ever designed to carry. And if you've ever lived through something like that even once, then you know it doesn't break loudly. It doesn't crash. It just folds softly, silently, as if the heart itself whispers, I can't hold all of this at the same time. People who have gone through too much understand that moment. And the strangest part is that you rarely realize you've become that person until life forces you to notice. Someone asks, why are you so calm about things that should bother you? And you don't know how to explain that it's not calmness. It's not peace. It's the quiet numbness that grows when your mind has been stretched far beyond what it was designed for. It's the stillness that happens when your emotions have run too many marathons without rest. Most people think resilience means strength, but resilience for people who have gone through too much feels more like a survival instinct, something you do because you had no other choice. And because of that, you carry a psychology that others can sense even if they can't describe it. There is a gravity to you, a depth behind your eyes, a softness in how you listen, a heaviness in how you pause before answering questions. You learn to fold your emotions into shapes that fit into the corners of your mind. You learn to keep walking even when your inner world feels like a storm. And there's something almost paradoxical about it. People who've been through too much often appear wise, calm, mature, thoughtful. They seem like the ones who have it together. But if anyone could open up their internal world, they would realize that this maturity wasn't earned. It was forced, not developed, but extracted. Not chosen, but required. Some people grow because they're nurtured. Others grow because life refuses to give them the version of childhood or youth that everyone else seems to have. And when you've lived through more emotional weight than your body was ever meant to carry, something happens to the way your mind forms itself. Psychologists refer to it in part as emotional overcompensation. When someone's nervous system has been overwhelmed, too many times it begins to reorganize itself. Not perfectly, not gracefully, but desperately. It adapts through hyper-awareness. It adapts through emotional bracing. It adapts through anticipating the worst, even when the worst is not coming. If you've ever wondered why you overthink so much, or why you scan for tone changes, or why you feel the need to prepare for problems that haven't happened, this is why. Your mind learned that uncertainty was dangerous, so it built defenses you never consciously asked for. And even if you heal, remnants remain. Like old architecture underneath a renovated building. People who have gone through too much carry an invisible curriculum. They know how to read silence. They know how to sense tension before anyone else feels it. They know how to step around conflict the way someone steps around broken glass. They know what it's like to calm others while their own heart is trembling. They know how to make themselves small in moments when attention feels unsafe. They know how to recover quickly from disappointment because life never gave them the luxury of falling apart. They develop emotional reflexes that others mistake for personality traits, but they're not traits. They're survival traits, learned responses, psychological autopilot scripts wired into the nervous system. Research shows that when someone experiences prolonged periods of stress or uncertainty, the brain recalibrates. It becomes more sensitive to threat, more reactive to subtle cues, more attuned to patterns others ignore. People call it intuition, but for many it isn't intuition. It's pattern recognition learned through necessity. There's a tenderness in people who have been through too much, a gentleness from knowing pain. This tenderness is often misinterpreted as weakness. But if you've lived heavy moments, you know the truth. Softness does not come from having an easy life. It comes from having a difficult one, a life that has taught you empathy through immersion. Everyone carries something they're not talking about. This empathy creates a strange contrast. You become the person who comforts others so naturally. People don't realize you've never truly been comforted yourself. You understand others because you've had to. Understand yourself in ways most people never do. You know how to give warmth from cold chapters. You know how to hold space because you've had moments when no one held it for you. But behind all that empathy hides something else. Exhaustion. The quiet exhaustion of being strong. Not the external exhaustion you show the world, but the internal one you carry alone. The exhaustion that doesn't make you rest but makes you retreat. Not healed by sleep, only understanding. You become someone who can carry everything except yourself. Someone who can't ask for help. Someone who gives clarity but lives with questions. Not because you don't trust others, but because your mind learned early on that relying on someone else was unpredictable, and unpredictability feels like the beginning of instability. People wonder why survivors become independent, to the point of isolation. But independence for them isn't confidence. It's protection. It's a shield, to the point of isolation. But independence for them isn't confidence. It's protection. It's a shield. They learn how to self-soothe, self-analyze, self-correct, self-care. Not because they want to, but because they had to. The outside world sees someone capable. The inner world knows someone tired, sensitive, quietly overwhelmed. This duality shapes their psychology in profound ways. They become familiar with emotional contradictions. They can be open yet guarded, caring yet detached, present yet distant. People who have gone through too much don't avoid vulnerability because they dislike it. They avoid it because vulnerability has historically come with consequences. Disappointment, misunderstanding, emotional imbalance. They learn early that vulnerability is not a shared experience. It's a risk. And because of that, they open up slowly, carefully, deliberately, revealing themselves in layers. It is out of self-preservation. But here's the truth that almost nobody tells them. Nothing about them is broken. Their reactions make sense. Their caution makes sense. Psychological adaptation is not a flaw. It is a response to circumstances. The mind is a storyteller. When someone has lived through too many difficult chapters, their psychological narrative becomes more complex. Their emotions become nuanced. Their internal world becomes layered with meanings others cannot see. Despite everything, there is something profoundly beautiful about the psychology of the survivor. They are often the ones who love quietly but deeply. They appreciate small kindnesses. They notice details others forget. They cherish moments of peace because they know what chaos feels like. They value emotional sincerity because they've seen the cost of pretending. One of the most remarkable traits they carry is this: they continue no matter what. Even when their heart feels heavy, even when their future feels uncertain, they continue. Not because they are unbreakable, but because they've already been broken and found a way to stand anyway. There is a wisdom that comes from surviving yourself, a maturity from navigating emotions without a map, a kind of self-awareness that comes from being forced to decode your inner world. Survivors carry all of this inside them like unspoken chapters of a book they never meant to write. Underneath all the survival instincts, there is still a part of them that wishes life had been easier. Not perfect, just gentler. A version where their nervous system wasn't trained to brace for impact. A version where they didn't have to be the strong one all the time. Yet they continue to carry wisdom that feels far older than their age. They turn their lessons into compassion, their pain into depth, their struggle into quiet power. People who have gone through too much don't just survive life. They interpret it. They reflect on it. They turn their past into insight and their emotions into meaning. In that transformation, they become a source of light for others, a lighthouse in the dark. They become the person you go to when you need honesty, calmness, or clarity. They become the person who listens without judgment, who understands without needing every detail. They know what it feels like to carry something you don't know how to explain. They know what it feels like to want someone to understand without asking you to relive the story. That is where their unique psychology becomes a gift to the world, a quiet, unnoticeable shift. When someone who has gone through too much realizes they see life differently than others, it happens slowly. You notice that things that make other people panic barely shake you. You notice that things that make others excited feel muted inside your chest. Your mind is always 2 steps ahead, analyzing possibilities and bracing for emotional ripples. Over time, you learn that this difference is simply the residue of everything you've carried. Survivors develop a relationship with reality that is both intimate and distant. On one hand, you feel everything deeply. On the other, you've learned to detach when it's overwhelming. This ability is a survival structure, balancing emotional intensity with emotional protection. It is emotional duality, the ability to feel empathy while suppressing vulnerability. To remain functional while your mind is carrying weight others don't see, you become someone who hesitates before happiness, someone who analyzes comfort before trusting it. You ask, is this real? Because your brain memorized that good moments were followed by difficult ones. Even if life changes, your nervous system doesn't forget easily. It still braces for the fall, even when the ground is solid. This can make relationships complicated, not because you don't care, but because you care with a depth that scares you. You fear losing people before they're even yours. You apologize too quickly. You forgive too easily. You stay silent about your needs. You listen more than you speak. You give more than you receive. And when someone asks, "What do you need?" you genuinely don't know how to answer. You never learn to think about your needs without feeling guilty. People who have gone through too much often develop a strange version of love. Steady, intense, quietly loyal yet cautious. You don't love recklessly, but with rare sincerity. You notice the small things. You sense when they're hurting before they say it. You show up in ways others overlook. But that sincerity comes with a price. You are easily wounded by carelessness and inconsistency. Because inconsistency feels like the beginning of abandonment. Abandonment awakens old memories in your nervous system. This is what many never understand. When you react strongly to something small, it's not the present moment you're reacting to. It's the echo of all the past moments where you felt unsafe, unprotected, unheard, or unseen. Your body responds to patterns even when the present is harmless. Emotions shift based on old associations. Instead of explaining, you stay quiet. You hide your triggers and mask your anxiety. You smile through discomfort and prioritize harmony even when your heart feels unsettled. You fear being misunderstood or labeled too sensitive, so you learn to keep your storms private. Yet here's the irony. These same people are often the emotional anchors for everyone around them. They give clarity, perspective, meaning. Friends come to them with deep fears and raw emotions, and they hold those emotions gently, compassionately, without judgment, because they understand. They've lived through things that forced them to become emotionally literate before they were ready. They've lived through things that forced them to become emotionally literate before they were ready. They feel the tension in conversations that others think are normal. They can tell when someone's "I'm fine" really means "I'm not okay." This is both a gift and a burden. It allows deep connection, but you feel responsible for others. You absorb too much. You internalize too much. You become a healer without noticing. And healers, if they're not careful, become exhausted. This shows up through subtle withdrawals. Someone who has gone through too much won't say they're overwhelmed. They simply become quieter. Messages become shorter. Laughs become softer. Presence becomes lighter. You try to disappear without alarming anyone. When asked if you're okay, you say, "I'm good," because you don't know how to explain the swirling inside you. You don't want to be a burden. You don't want to relive the emotions by putting them into words, so you keep it all inside. But there is another side to this, a strength others can't comprehend. Not loud but quiet strength, the kind that endures and keeps showing up for life. You've lived through too many emotional winters to be afraid of the cold. You've walked through storms without umbrellas and rebuilt yourself from ruins more than once. That gives you inner resilience, ordinary resilience. The resilience to try again, to trust and love again, even when it scares you, even when your mind whispers to stay guarded. Deep down, people who have gone through too much still desire connection and softness. They still dream of a life where they don't have to be the strong one all the time. This hope, small but persistent, keeps them moving forward. What truly shapes them is the way they reflect on their experiences. They don't just live through pain. They analyze it, interpret it, and turn it into insight. They find meaning in difficult memories, lessons in loss, clarity in chaos, and growth in heartbreak. This creates a worldview that is both fragile and powerful. Fragile from wounds, powerful from wisdom. Wisdom that makes them patient and empathetic, seeing life from angles others can't. They know people act out of their own wounds and that healing is not linear. Boundaries are necessary, but compassion is essential. But there's one more piece. They carry invisible grief, not for a person, but for versions of themselves they lost. The version who trusted easily or felt carefree. This grief shapes them into someone more intentional. It makes them cherish moments others overlook. A peaceful morning, a soft touch, a safe presence. These small things feel sacred because they've lived through chapters when nothing felt safe. Despite everything, they keep growing in self-worth and emotional regulation. They learn to differentiate between instinct and trauma, opening up again courageously. Survivors are defined by what they chose to become. Everything you became was adaptation and intelligence. You grew through it, and that growth is now your quiet power.